And if the awareness gets distracted by a sound, a sensation, or a thought, don't worry, just gently bring it back to the breath, and back to the mantra. And as you allow the awareness to merge with the breath, and as the mantra of so chants on your inhalation and exhalation, as that is happening, allow the energy, the power of the mind's sight, means the sight that doesn't come from the two eyes, but that comes from the power to see. Allow that power of sight to focus itself from the inside onto your third eye center. So it's not so much just about a rolling of the eyes. It's not that. It's about the power of the energy to see, a directing of that power up to your third eye. So allow the awareness to stay merged in the breath. But for that power of sight, the power of the intention of sight, to be directed straight into your third eye. And the beautiful mantra of Soham chants itself on your inhalations and exhalations. Slowly and gently, bring the palms of your hands together at chest level and rub them gently against each other. Press the palms of your hands into your closed eyes. Slowly open the eyes and lower the hands. Welcome to Satsang. So beautiful to be together with you all. Beginning, as always, with a question that came in advance from online, and then we'll open it up to any questions that any of you have here. Please lead me to peace. I need to get rid of my envy and fear. Well, first of all, a beautiful congratulations to Kamini, who's asked the question, for realizing that it's her own envy and fear that's stealing her peace. Most of us blame someone or something outside of us. For most of us, if you say, why are you not living in peace? Everybody will say, well, God, my boss, or my employee, or my mother-in-law, or my daughter-in-law, or my brother-in-law, or my next-door neighbor, or my kids, or my lack of kids, or the traffic. We're very good at blaming things outside. In fact, my very favorite joke that I tell all the time is the joke of the man who goes to the doctor. And he says to the doctor, there's something very wrong with me. Whatever I touch, it hurts. When I touch my leg, it hurts. And I touch my arm, it hurts. And I touch my back, it hurts. So the doctor is really surprised. And of course, he runs every test and scan. And he calls the man in and he says, well, the good news is there's nothing wrong with your back or your knees or your stomach, your head. The bad news is your finger's broken. And because your finger's broken, whatever you touch, it hurts. But it doesn't hurt because the problem is outside. It hurts because the problem is this broken connection. And I love the joke story and tell it all the time because it's a really perfect metaphor, analogy for what happens in our own lives. We're suffering in our lives. But we blame all the things outside in the same way that the guy with the broken finger thought the problem was in, all the different parts of his body, when it was actually just the broken connection of the bone in his finger. And in our lives, that connection between us and the divine, between us and our true self, between us and each other is broken. And so we suffer. Everything hurts. Life hurts. But we usually think the problem is somewhere outside. So kudos to Kamini for realizing that it's her own envy and fear that's stealing her peace. Now the question, of course, is how to get rid of them. So envy, let's take envy first. Envy is a virus. It's not contagious, thankfully. You can't get it from touching something or eating something or drinking something, but it's a virus in our hearts because envy is that which grows and grows and grows, keeps replicating. and makes us unable to live mentally healthy lives, emotionally healthy lives, spiritually healthy lives. Envy stems out of the myth, the misconception that somehow I am lacking in some way, that there's something not enough in me. And therefore, I'm very envious of the person who has it. I don't feel happy in my life. I don't feel like I will find happiness in my life. Therefore, everyone who's happy, it makes me feel miserable. Instead of being able to join in their joy, I find myself going, oh God, why not me? That's not fair. Why don't I have that? I hate you for having that. That should be mine. And we suffer. But it's born out of this idea that somehow I am lacking. If I'm full, think about it for a minute. If you're hungry, your stomach is empty, and someone walks right by you eating this piping hot, beautifully smelling piece of pizza, right? You're going to be like, oh my God, I want that piece of pizza. Now, it's not going to be the level of suffering that usually we have with envy, but just on a lighter note. Immediately, you're going to want what that person has. You're going to wish you had it. You're going to think you should have it instead. If somebody walks by eating these really beautifully smelling chocolate chip cookies, you'll be like, oh my God, how can I steal them, grab them, convince the person to give them to me? That's because you're hungry, your stomach's empty. If you've just finished a beautiful meal and you are so stuffed that you don't even have room for, half a glass of water, somebody could walk by you eating an entire pizza out of the box, and you're not going to think, I wish that were mine. Because you're full. And so on a deeper level, the answer to my envy is the awareness that I'm already full, that there's nothing lacking in me. And there's nothing lacking in the universe. There's no scarcity. Because that's the other myth that breeds envy. So myth one is I'm lacking in some way. I'm not smart enough, successful enough, beautiful enough, happy enough, smart enough. The other myth is there's a finite amount of happiness, of success, of love in the universe. And therefore, every time someone else gets some, there's less in it for me. As though somehow there were some finite pie of happiness. And every slice you got meant there was less for me. But it's not like that. There's an infinite amount of love in the world. Someone else falling in love or getting married doesn't mean that there's less love to be had. There's an infinite amount of success. Someone else being promoted, making it, being a great success. It's not a chunk out of the global, universal success pie. There's an infinite amount. So we have to overcome those two myths. You are not lacking, and there is not a finite amount of joy and peace and love and success. It's infinite. And the third way out of envy. So the first two are practices within myself of overcoming myths. The third is a more direct practice with other people. start a practice of appreciation. So if you look at someone and you find yourself so jealous of how beautiful they are, like you can't look at them because it just makes you feel ugly and, too fat or too thin or too tall or too short or too dark or too fair or whatever you want to be, that person is it, and you feel like you're not. Instead, can you go into a practice of appreciation? Look at that person like they are a work of art. Imagine you're in a museum or an art gallery. Nobody looks at the Mona Lisa and goes, "Oh, that's not fair." Right? I mean, nobody goes to see a photography exhibit of beautiful portraits and says, "Oh God, can you believe how beautiful she is?" Like, that's so unfair. We appreciate the art. We appreciate the way the photographer took the picture, the play of light and color and form. Or in a painting, we appreciate the art. We're not walking out of a museum feeling miserable about ourselves. So in that same way, appreciate people like beautiful works of art. Are they beautiful, wonderful? Appreciate them like that. Are they so smart? Imagine that instead of being someone you're secretly competing with or, secretly wishing that you had that, secretly feeling envious or jealous, instead, just think of them as like your favorite podcast host, right? And you're telling your friend, "Oh my God, this guy is so smart," or "This woman is so smart. I love them. You should listen to them. Subscribe to this podcast." Again, nobody listens to a podcast thinking, "Oh, that's so unfair that this, interviewer is so smart. I should be." We listen to enjoy and to benefit from the wisdom, the inspiration, the knowledge, the stories, the laughter, whatever it is we're listening to. But it's not making us feel less about ourselves because the podcast host happens to be so funny or smart or successful or popular. So in the same way, find ways to appreciate those you feel jealous of. Instead of thinking of yourself somehow in competition with them, think of them as someone you really appreciate for whatever that quality may be. And allow that practice of appreciation to blossom whenever you're with them. So those three things will help you overcome envy. And then overcoming fear. Now, first of all, it's important to realize fear is not your enemy. I'm going to repeat that. Fear is not your enemy. Fear is your friend, to an extent. We are here, every single one of us is here, because our ancestors were afraid. We are the descendants of those who lived to procreate. If our ancestors, imagine going back a few hundred or a few thousand years, where there were, you were living outside or in huts or whatever, wild tigers, lions, or whatever. Now, imagine that you're living a few hundred or a few thousand years ago. You're sitting outside your hut, and suddenly in the distance you hear the sound that you know means there's tigers coming, or lions coming, or a pack of wild elephants coming. And you say, that's all right. I'm going to finish my cup of tea first. Chances are you didn't live to procreate, or you certainly didn't live to procreate anymore. But instead, if when you heard that sound or you felt the ground vibrating, you got out of there. You climbed a tree, you got your bow and arrow, or however people protected themselves. You did whatever you needed to do, your spear, in order to protect yourself. That fear instinct is what kept you alive long enough to have babies. We are the descendants of those babies. Our ancestors who walked the top of cliffs and said, I wonder what's down there, and took a step over the edge, didn't live to make babies. The ones who got to the edge and went, stepped back a few feet, they lived to make babies. We are the children of those babies. So fear of heights, fear of quickly rushing deep water, fear of wild elephants, or wild animals. These are things that are natural. And when I say natural, I mean literally like embedded in our DNA, in our epigenetics. I mean, it's all of that stuff that we carry in every aspect of us, because it's what's kept our ancestors alive. The adventurous ones, the reckless ones, they might have been the most popular ones, but they're not the ones who made the most babies. The ones who made the most babies were the cautious ones, the careful ones, the ones whose heart beat a little bit faster when they saw the tiger in the distance. So they got away. So that type of fear is your friend. And I mention it because these days when we're talking about fearlessness, it's become a real call, and that's great. In the Bhagavad Gita, if you had to sum it up in one word, you would say fearlessness. Bhagawan Krishna spent 700 verses making Arjuna fearless. But not reckless. And not fearless because nothing's going to happen to me. But fearless from a deep, deep spiritual awareness that says, I'm not the body. When he said to Krishna, I could die, Krishna didn't say, oh, don't worry about it, you won't, I promise. He said, yeah, you might. You might. But to die in the service of your dharma is 1,000,000 times better than to live forever and not fulfill your dharma. Point being, the fearlessness that he gave him was not, oh, don't worry. You're like Rambo, nothing's going to happen to you, I promise. You've got this in the bag. But it was, be fearless because even if you die, it's only the body. So fearlessness is something that we've called for a long time, but not so much the way that it's being given out today, which is, oh, don't worry, jump out of airplanes, jump off cliffs, do this, conquer your fear. Are you afraid of jumping out of an airplane? You should do it. Now, I'm not here to tell you not to go for adventure tourism if that's what you want to do. But the point is, there's a reason that we are afraid of jumping out of airplanes. And it's actually a good reason. It has kept us alive all this long. The type of fear, though, that steals our peace, that she's asking about, is not the type of fear that is good, that has kept our ancestors and us alive. The type of fear that most of us suffer from these days is not death of the body. It's injury to the ego. COVID gave us fear of actual death for a while. There was this very, very heightened fear of, oh my God, I'm going to get sick and die. But the fear that most people live with, that steals their peace, that keeps them awake at night, is not a fear of losing their physical body or harm to their physical body. It's a fear of harm to their ego. This is why we say things like, oh my God, I died of embarrassment. Well, nobody's actually ever died of embarrassment. But the ego dies or gets injured. And so the fear that most of us have these days is fear of injury to our ego. It's why we say things like, my God, I just couldn't tell him that because then he would be angry with me. Or, oh my God, then he would think that I was arrogant. I couldn't stand up to her. I couldn't tell her the truth. I couldn't speak my truth. Because I was afraid she'd make a fool of me in front of everyone, that she'd humiliate me in front of the whole office or in front of all my friends. This is ego injury. This is not helpful fear. This is the fear that steals our peace. So in order to let go of that fear, first of all, you have to be really clear who is afraid. It's the ego. I mean, at the end of the day, imagine that your worst fears came true. And you actually were embarrassed. You know, public speaking, they've done all these polls in America, and public speaking is the number one greatest fear that people have in America the last time I read the research. More than guns. Now, nobody's ever died giving a bad speech. Nobody's ever died blanking out on a stage and forgetting everything. Guns are what they need to be afraid of. Guns are what everybody's picking up and carrying into shopping centers and grocery stores and schools. But the greatest fear is not guns. It's public speaking. Why? Because our egos are so afraid. And the dilemma with that is we literally keep our lives, it's like we live in a vice that's strangling us because we're so afraid of, oh my God, I might be embarrassed. People might laugh at me. If you're not prepared for people to laugh at you, and I don't necessarily mean laugh with you, could actually be laugh at you. If you're not prepared for that, it means you're not taking risks in your life. And if you're not taking risks, it means you're not growing. So being prepared for people to laugh at you is really important. I'm not saying it's fun. I'm not saying we should go out of our way to make it happen. But we have to realize that if it does happen, okay. Worst case scenario, all of these people think I'm really stupid. Worst case scenario, all of these people think I'm, useless. First of all, it never actually happens like that. But even in our worst fear, worst case scenario, okay. So an audience of people think you're stupid. Is that really worth sacrificing your life, staying small? Living in a vice? Of course not. And as I said, it never happens because people are human, even if you make a fool of yourself. That's the time that people come up and they say, it's okay, it's okay. You do a great job, that's when people are jealous and actually more likely to think negatively. Why her and not me? Why him and not me? Make a fool of yourself, that's actually what's going to make everybody come up and say, oh my God, you were great, don't worry, it's okay, you were wonderful. Yeah, we know you forgot everything you were going to say. That's okay, don't worry, come on, let's go get some ice cream. So we have to be prepared for our ego to be injured in order for us to step up to the plate of our life and realize, of course, that the universe, the divine, is there for us. It's catching us. You know, we do these trust fall experiences in school and corporate retreats and team building retreats. And it's one of these really basic things, I imagine most of you have done it, where they pair you up with someone. And you literally close your eyes and you fall back like this into the arms of the person behind you. Now, sometimes that person is a stranger. Sometimes they're an enemy, the schoolyard bully or a competitor. But we always close our eyes and drop back because we know they will catch us. Even if they're a stranger. Even if they're a competitor or an enemy, they're not going to let us fall down and crack our head on the ground. So if we've got that kind of faith in a stranger or in an enemy, that they're going to catch us, let us have that same faith in the divine, in the universe. Any questions here? Yes.
Hello. I have a question that how does one work with guilt and a lot of what-ifs that happen in the mind?
Great. So, guilt is another virus. We were talking about it the other night, actually, and I'm going to repeat just one piece of what I said then because it's really important. There's a big difference between guilt and regret. Regret is useful. Regret says, I made a mistake, knowingly or unknowingly, didn't go so well. In the future, I need to do something different. Or I need to do something to make amends for this thing I did that ended up not being very skillful and may have harmed somebody unintentionally. But regret is always about an action, the thing I did. Guilt says, you are a bad person. Guilt is untruth. And a lot of times if we have guilt, it's because at some important formative time in our life, probably our youth, somebody put into us this idea of what a good girl or a good boy in someone else's case is like and does, what a good person is, what a good husband or wife is. And we've got these ideas that are given to us of how we are supposed to be, what a good, worthy person is. And when we don't feel like we live up to it, this pervasive sense of guilt starts eating us alive. And the way out of that is to realize that the voice of guilt is telling you an untruth. There is nothing wrong with you. You are doing the very best you can with the tools that you've got in the karmic situation that you find yourself in. You're doing your best. And if you find in a moment of regret that you didn't do your best, okay, commit to doing your best. But when you are doing your best, but you're in very frequently really challenging situations where there isn't really a way out, we feel guilty. I'm not doing good enough over here, not doing well enough over here. Everybody feels it. Women feel it a lot. Torn between family and work. Torn between our parents and our children. Our parents-in-law and our children. Torn between so many of the competing pulls upon us by society, with culture and belief that says, if you were a good girl, you would do like this. And for whatever reason, that's not what comes through us. But you need to know that there is no cookie cutter, no matter who told it to you. There is no cookie cutter mold for a good girl, for a good wife, for a good mother, for a good daughter. You're doing your best. And realize that you've been given the situation you're given for you to grow, for you to expand, not for you to contract in guilt. The universe doesn't want you to feel guilty. The universe wants you to grow and expand, realizing that you are not the sum total of things you didn't get done today. So many of us go to sleep at night feeling like who we are is the sum total of things that have not been crossed off our to-do list. That somehow we don't deserve to go to sleep yet because we have not yet ticked off these things. This is an insidious, it's truly sickening, like it makes us sick, untrue cultural myth. And so you have to stop buying into it. Every time that voice arises, just say, no, I will not believe this. I know I'm doing my best. I know that I'm doing sincerely. I know that I'm doing with my full love and compassion and capacity. But I also know that I'm not a machine. I know that I'm a human being with a physical body that needs tending to, with a mind and a heart that needs tending to, with a certain toolbox of resources and skills and time and ability. As long as you are clear between you and God, that's all that matters. I decided that a long time ago. That as long as I was clear with God and with my guru, it didn't matter who said girls are supposed to be like this, women are supposed to be like that. You should be doing this, you should be doing that, you shouldn't be doing that. You'll kill yourself like that. I mean, literally. The guilt will kill you and it will drive you crazy. You have to let yourself get free. You're on the banks of Ganga, just give it to Ganga. Tell her, look, Ma, you know I'm doing my best. You know that. Take this guilt from me and let me just always feel your love, your nurturing, your nourishing, your arms. Baki kuch bhi kahe, don't worry about it. Don't let it steal your life. Okay? Good. Yeah. उनको माइक देना भैया.
is really fantastic and very good learning actually. But my query is on when we move out from this ashram and go back to our corporate world, things are not like that. The criteria or the parameters or expectations would be different. So the thing is, this is good from that only we moved out and we came here and to have this learning. But the thing is, when we go back to that world, because we have to run family, we have other duties, responsibilities from corporate perspective, from family perspective. So how one can cope up with those things as well? I have this.
Sure. So, look, corporations, companies, businesses did not fall out of the sky. We created them. Us. We are the businesses, the corporations, the companies, the society. It's not separate from us. It's not like we woke up one morning and suddenly these things called corporations existed. And we had to figure out how to, live our values and ethics now with this whole new culture. We created them. We create our neighborhoods. We create our societies. We create our businesses, both on the consuming and purchasing end as well as on the production end. It's us. And so, we can keep talking about how to bring your peace into the business world, how to bring your peace into that. And it's important, and of course the way to do it is allowing yourself to actually be changed here. When you are changed, then when you go back, you are different. And then you make different choices and decisions. We are not slaves. We make choices and decisions. This is where I want to work. This is what I want to do. And that's fine. I'm not the moral police or the spiritual police. But you have to realize that whatever decision you make, it's a package deal. It's not just the money, it's the culture. It's not just the opportunity, it's the values. And so we have to really decide what we want to do and how do we want our companies to run. Does the bottom line have to always be how much profit? Couldn't a bottom line also include how much good in the world? Couldn't a bottom line also include the mental health of our employees? I mean, there's all sorts of ways that one could redefine bottom line. But I'm not in business. So chances are I'm not going to end up being the one who redefines that. That's going to have to come from within. People in companies, in corporations, in businesses are going to have to come together and say, you know what? This works for my bank account, but it doesn't work for my heart. Can we rethink this? So do both. Number one, allow yourself to really change here so that when you go back, you are different, whatever the environment may be. But for all of you, in businesses, in companies, in corporations, in communities, in society, realize you make up that society. If you want it to be different, start showing the way. And that's where that fearlessness comes in. Yeah, some people may say, my God, look at her. Can you believe it? Wearing the same sari she wore last week. Doesn't she know she's supposed to buy a new one every week? They may laugh. But slowly, 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 you're going to start attracting a lot of people who are really tired of having to buy brand new clothes for every single wedding. A lot of people who are really tired of these junk values, essentially. And you'll start to have a community of people with your values. I have to bring satsang to a close. I've got a workshop that I'm leading in 15 minutes with a beloved friend, a beloved sacred musician, Snatam Kaur. So I have to go and be online for that. That's why we started early today, because I knew I was going to have to end early. Also, I am leaving tomorrow evening to go to Abu Dhabi and then Dubai for a beautiful interfaith conference around the G20, of bringing the voice of interfaith spirituality into the G20. I will be back on the 16th, so we will have satsang again on the 16th. I hope that most of you will still be here, and those of you who won't be here, it was wonderful to be together, and I hope that you come back home to Rishikesh very, very soon.